People play video games to feel a high, and that high can come from different places. Some people might want an action game, but the category is so broad. Finding the type of action that you want can be difficult. There's so many genres and subgenres and debates about what games fit under certain categories and which ones don't. Even when games are labeled correctly, sometimes you don't know what you want until you see it. But for me, the type of games that I enjoy the most tend to be hack and slashes. If I had to define them, I'd say that they're action games that emphasize fast and close-up combat with melee weapons, typically rewarding skill and technique by stringing combos together. Some might consider that definition improper and say no, the type of games that you like are called character action games. It can turn into an endless debate that I'm not interested in. What's more interesting is talking about what they do and what makes these games so cool. But first, we're gonna go back in time. The origins of hack and slashes can be found in a few places. Wikipedia will tell you that the term itself comes from tabletop role-playing games. Other sources will say that its roots in video games lie in 2D arcade games from the 80s. Some people cite Dynasty Warriors as the starting point, but I think that the modern hack and slash starts with a game that is pretty well known.
Let's rock, baby.
Devil May Cry was one of the standout action titles on the PS2, and just one game in an incredible set of 2001 holiday exclusives. It went from being a prototype of Resident Evil 4 to being an over-the-top action game with swords and magic and demons and guns. I think by today's standards it can feel quite stiff and repetitive, but having a game where you could slash and infinitely blast at enemies, and a character that could stand up to just about anything that hell throws at him, made it a power fantasy to remember. But the spaces between combat are what a lot of fans remember the most. That first level where there's nothing else to do but to familiarize yourself with the controls and collect orbs, taking in the gothic architecture as these haunting piano melodies loop in the background. It's a strange mixture of light horror and absurd heroics. It's absolutely ridiculous, and players loved it. Still do. Considering how popular Devil May Cry is now, I think a lot of people already know that the first game was originally a prototype of Resident Evil 4. Hideki Kamiya directed it, and when it became too action-packed, it became its own title. But I think a lesser-known fact is its relation to Onimusha. It's another action game that's basically just like if parts of old-school Resident Evil and Devil May Cry had a baby. These games were being developed at the same time, and Kamiya goes over to a colleague who is working on it and sees one of the enemies getting slashed and juggled in the air. And Kamiya goes, damn, that's so cool. And his colleague goes, yeah, it's a bug we're trying to fix right now. Kamiya basically says, well, that's boring. Why isn't this in my game? So he goes over to one of the programmers, Kazunori Inoue, and tells him, I want this in the game. And that becomes a signature technique in Devil May Cry. But Onimusha has a much bigger part in inspiring God of War, and God of War's signature becomes its violence.
Brutal, nasty, violent, antisocial, pissed off, angry, fuck you. I want this game to make players just go nuts and feel that sense of anger and chaos.
Creative director David Jaffe plays Onimusha and goes, well, what if we just do that but with Greek mythology? What if we were able to direct all of our anger through a protagonist? It was revised again and again to be as brutal as possible. And the result is just pure chaos. Armed with combos of wide-sweeping slash attacks, magic, and the ability to rip enemies apart and pulverize them, players are given all the tools they need to butcher enemies as they adventure through ancient Greece. Both God of War and Devil May Cry would spawn incredible sequels that would constantly raise the bar for these types of action games, but soon a female contender would appear to challenge the genre again. In 2006, Platinum Games was founded, and a portion of the original Devil May Cry team and former Capcom employees come over too. The producer at the time, Yusuke Hashimoto, yearns for another 3D action game from Hideki Kamiya, and with the team's talent and experience, they decide on creating an action game with a female lead. A witch in the modern era, with guns. They settle on the idea of physically striking the enemy with guns like a bayonet, attach weapons to her feet, position her as a fierce opponent to the heavens, and continuously pump it up as much as they can until they get Bayonetta. The few people who aren't new here know that I adore this game, and it's not hard to see why. Just like Dante, Bayonetta steals the show whenever she's on screen. Heaven's strongest forces will be constantly descending upon you. But don't worry, you've got giant feet. Bayonetta's combat will have you punching, shooting, slashing, stomping, choking, decapitating, whatever this is, you get the point. She's incredibly powerful and she's got quite a sadistic streak, but even so, she never fails to dish out her punishments with grace. Even when she's summoning giant demons from the depths of hell to squash and chew through angels, she does it with finesse. Dodging at the right moment earns you witch time, an ability that slows enemies down while you speed up, and with 2 weapon sets to equip to your hands and feet, you're left with some truly insane possibilities for your combos. It's fun to watch and even more fun to master. And that's just the first game. Bayonetta 2 takes the first game spectacle and cranks it up to infinity, with a gorgeous new setting, a new army of angels and demons to fight, and another set of powerful weapons to play with. It does exactly what a sequel should do. Devil May Cry, God of War, Bayonetta, all of these games do an amazing job at giving you a spectacle, giving you the rush and the thrill that you crave, and their successors are great at doubling that feeling. But what if you're craving a different kind of intensity? Let's go back in time again. God of War and Devil May Cry were originally PlayStation exclusives, but meanwhile, on the other side of the gaming pond, an old NES title called Ninja Gaiden would be reborn for the original Xbox. Ninja Gaiden is a little different compared to the games I mentioned before. While these games tend to encourage button mashing and dispensing of enemies as quickly as possible, Ninja Gaiden requires a more defensive approach. Which is not to say that the other games are easy, I know this one fucking isn't, but Ninja Gaiden definitely presents a different kind of challenge. I remember when I played it for the first time, I spent like 20 minutes just playing around in the starting area and being impressed by all of the wall running and combos I was pushing out, and I was ready to go crazy, only to get killed by the first boss again and again and again, just doing the same exact thing over and over again and expecting different results. Sounds familiar. I know that comparison might irk a lot of people, but I tend to group them together mainly for the lessons that they've taught me. I think there's a lot of games that I wouldn't have bothered with now if it wasn't for games like Ninja Gaiden and Souls.
This is a new game. Hey.
Ninja Gaiden's most important lesson is right there in its manual, and a lot of players can miss it. Knowing when to defend is the true mark of a ninja. Or actually, you can just cross out most of it, just this part here. Knowing when. What most people do, and what I did when I first started playing, is try to force out as many combos as possible onto an enemy, and when you get hit, you do it again. You panic, which is precisely what you should not do. But you keep doing it anyway. You won't find a universal technique for enemies. You can get through most of the early area by guarding, but the first boss can break your guard and counter that, as do many of the other enemies in this game. You will find your moment by studying enemies carefully and finding the right opportunity. It's such a simple lesson, but so important. I feel like it rewired my brain. Ninja Gaiden requires an open mind and rewards your patience. It's difficult, but you already have all the tools you need to succeed. If you go into it expecting stylish combat instantly, you'll be disappointed, because it's a game that will reward you with style, if you take the time to learn it. In other words, if you want a show, you'll really have to earn it. And I appreciate it for those reasons, even if it's not my preferred choice of action game. It's also worth saying that please don't feel like you need to keep the difficulty high on any of these games. It's true that some games won't be for everyone, but if you're dedicated to playing these games, then prioritize your experience. Walkthroughs, guides, difficulty settings, they're there for a reason. Do what makes sense for you. So, Devil May Cry, God of War, Bayonetta, Ninja Gaiden, are you noticing a pattern here? All of these games have intricate and unique combat systems, with some emphasizing carnage and others emphasizing precision. Their respective presentations of combat do most of the talking for them, but you know what they don't do that well? The story.
You know, she's pretty hot for a dead chick.
Why do they even keep you around, man? I've given nothing but praise to all of these games, but all of them have sections that we'd much rather forget than replay. Like, why the fuck am I fighting a helicopter? Why am I getting squashed by a bunch of magical cubes? Why am I fighting this guy? I swear I just fought him earlier. This section is making me nauseous. All of them have a bit of downtime to break the gameplay up, and that usually involves some sort of puzzle with keys or pole dancing in Bayonetta's case, but sometimes you just don't want to be doing it. It's nice to have a break, but when it overstays its welcome, it gets boring. And the same can be said of the story. Aside from maybe God of War, I have yet to see a hack and slash with a story that's good. And that's mostly fine because that's not really the focus of them. These games usually have enough interesting things going on to hook you anyway. You're like, oh, the story isn't that strong, but it's got a badass premise and the combat's cool. This story is really weak, but the dialogue is really funny.
Why isn't this working?
And the mechanical depth is crazy. I don't really care what this guy's yapping about, but what the fuck? These games don't require deep stories, but they all have a good setting and enough combat highs to make up for any story lows anyway. No More Heroes said to players, we know you don't have any patience for the story, so here's the short version.
I want to be number one. How's that? Short and simple enough for you?
And then it had you working part-time. But usually in these games, characters can yap for just enough time before it starts getting boring, which is why Bayonetta 3 was such a disappointment. In a game that already had so much tedium where it shouldn't have, they ended up putting a lot of effort into a story that was never that good in the first place. A story that talks so loudly over the rest of it. I was riding a dragon with boats on its feet not that long ago, and you're still shoving this multiverse story down my throat? What? I'd argue that with Ninja Gaiden it's a bit different because it takes itself way too seriously for a game that puts a ninja in a gimp suit up against military soldiers. I can remember enemies and fights, but the story? Cutscenes? The only one that I remember is when Ryu just pieces out at the end without saying a word. It's the only game where I kind of argue that, you know, the serious tone isn't a bad thing, but it would be nice to have a story that backs it up. At the same time, it's something that I overlook because of my bias with the other games. If I enjoyed Ninja Gaiden's combat more, it probably wouldn't matter, because when Ninja Gaiden 2's story failed, its emphasis on gore and finishes made up for that loss for me. It's not a big deal. But if you want a demonstration of where these faults are actually a problem, then look at Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade didn't feel like that much of a hack and slash when I played it, more like a strange mixture of different elements from hack and slashes and Souls-likes. And like I said before, properly categorizing them is annoying, but it still stands that people were comparing Stellar Blade to other hack and slashes with female leads. I remember there was this post from ages ago that put Nier, Bayonetta and Stellar Blade as the big three in this category. First of all, love Nier, but the combat doesn't even come close to Bayonetta's, and aside from an okay combat system and decent fights, Stellar Blade doesn't offer much else of substance. It's so mediocre that it's actually hard to complain, because I'd be lying if I said that I hated it. It wasn't that bad. Like, look, that looks cool, right? And these environments are pretty, right? But Jesus, it was boring. Every time I tried to engage with it further, it felt like it was pushing me back. The side quests are just boring fetch quests, and the main story is just Diet Nier. Somehow, this game wants you to be convinced that the protagonist and all of her companions are human. But, spoilers, the big twist is that they're androids and that the monsters you're fighting are actually mutated humans. Which, I mean, first of all, I refuse to believe that humans would ever evolve to wear heels like this. Implants are not. Ow. But the actual problem is this dialogue. You really think people are gonna believe they're human when they're talking like this?
We got it. The hypercell. Eve, thank you.
Okay.
Alright then. Let's head to Zion.
Yes!
Before the war we call the final war, there was another war.
You don't say. When the game's main characters sound like they don't care about what's going on, why the hell should I? My main point here is that you remember these games for more than just their combat.
Beautiful.
We remember the anger and the rage in God of War. We remember the music and the absurd cutscenes in Metal Gear Rising, and where other hack and slashes lack in story or drag with repetitive encounters, they make up for it with other qualities that show up in full force.
Fucking giant letter bullshit!
Unfortunately, everything that Stellar Blade does has been done better by other games in the genre.
This feels like too much risk, not enough reward.
And I don't think you'll remember much of it other than the obvious. The best hack and slashes have something to say. It's usually never through its story, but through the language that matters the most in these games, the combat. When developers take the time to craft systems that are interesting mechanically as well as visually, players notice. It inspires them to push further and to take it to the next level, going beyond what is usually expected of them. But like all art, all of its elements should be complementing each other. Even if one part is weaker than the other, it should be enough to leave a good impression and encourage you. Devil May Cry 5. The story's meh, but it has that mechanical depth and plenty of flair to match it. When you're playing well, it says to you, hey, I like your style, and it rewards you with the chorus of its songs. It's encouraging you to be better. It wants you to match its level of crazy. The best hack and slashes are a dance, performance. But of all of them, I think the Bayonetta is the best at showing it. The academic articles that I found on specifically Bayonetta's combat complement its scale, the excess and the dramatic performance that follows. Players enjoyed watching her as well as playing as her and relished the feeling of having a powerful character at their disposal. And even though this is only from 2 studies, I don't need studies to show you how ridiculous and theatrical Bayonetta is because it's constantly showing you. It's the kind of game where gods get punched into space and into dragons' mouths. Where characters are having dance-offs. The combat, enemies, stages, music, cutscenes, all of it has been meticulously crafted to be as loud as possible to bring out the best in each other. Team Little Angels put a ridiculous amount of effort into creating a heroine that looks good and feels good to play as well as giving her the right stage to show it all off. And the best part is that you can participate in it too.
You've been naughty.
That's what makes it so special for me. But of course everyone has their preference. I think what makes me sad is the current lack of steps forward in the genre. It's not like there have been no moves made at all beyond these games. There are actually many games that I didn't talk about further, like Hi-Fi Rush, a hack and slash where everything is synced to the beat, or Ninja Gaiden 4, the first Ninja Gaiden developed by Platinum Games. These are both great games. My only issues with Hi-Fi Rush is that I want the combat to be faster and I want cooler songs to play along to. Ninja Gaiden 4 has exactly the kind of action that I adore in these games, and while it seems like a lot of Ninja Gaiden fans enjoyed it, they're likely to say that it didn't have the same feel as a Ninja Gaiden game. It felt like a Platinum game. The problem is that the iconic hack and slashes have a very distinct identity among players, and some of the new ones that have followed feel like weird hybrids between genres. They feel a little homogenous instead of feeling like something new. I have yet to see a hack and slash that leaves as much of an impact as these ones do. But I don't want to be too negative, it's not like it's a dead genre or anything, and I'm aware that my standards can be too high sometimes. Game development is hard and costly, and the industry is pretty horrible right now. If it wasn't for Krafton, or Krafton whatever, the chances of a sequel to Hi-Fi Rush would have gone to zero. There really isn't some grand conclusion that I'm going for. My main goal with this video, as it usually is with all of my videos, is to talk about games that I like, and I hope that if you haven't already, you'll play some of the games that I mentioned. Support me by subscribing or through the links in the description, and I hope to see you next time.
Don't you dare say it! Jackpot!